always say this a little bit when I'm in camp meetings, especially young ones like this. These things are birthed not only out of the South, they were birthed just prior. Well, there was camp meetings before the Civil War, retreats, I guess, but in the Civil War, people had a burden for our soldiers, both on the North and the South. And what they would do after those great battles, they would go into those areas and they would go up those battlefields. And those men were wounded. Many of those men died days after those battles. And it was just gory. It was a terrible, terrible death. And they'd lead those men to God. They'd go from casualty to casualty. They'd go from hospital to hospital. And then the men would camp in their families. If you know anything about the Civil War, it wasn't like our modern war, and they would camp, and their families would come, and sometimes camp with them while they waited for the next battle and would heal up and get ready to move. And they'd have what we call camp meetings. And they'd put up tents, brush arbors, and these soldiers and their families would come. And I'll tell you, when they came, they knew that death was just around the corner, and knew that God was dealing with them, and hundreds got saved. And then it kept it up afterwards. And people would lay aside a certain time of the year, go and stay. That's why they call it camp meeting. We don't do that as much. Brother Green's last week, they had a campground. People came, spent the whole week. And it's an idea to get away from the world, the flesh, and the devil, and spend time just with God for a few days and let him deal with our hearts. And I'll tell you, we need it. Amen. And I'll tell you who gets it and needs it too, and that's these preachers that you have opened your doors to and invited to come. Some of them may not preach, and they may preach or may give testimony, but some of these folks have been on the road, been on mission fields, been in pastorates, and their hearts are broken. They're cold. They're not where they should be with God. They've got the veneer, the facade, and a meeting like this can touch them and get them back and encourage them. If this church could ever get that in their heart, to be an encouragement and blessing. And then your pastor, as I did for 13 years, would get letters from men I didn't even know were in the meeting. I didn't even know them. They'd come. I had people from 23 states that would come. And I'd get letters back. Thank God for so-and-so's message. It'll help us to keep going for another. We was ready to quit the ministry. And I'll tell you, that makes it all worthwhile. Amen? And know that God's given you that opportunity to do that ought to be an encouragement to you. It ought to be a frightful thing. It's a big responsibility, but we have a big God. Amen?